After 10 years away, he discovered an incredible secret, a boy identical to him at the lake house. Ben drove up the winding road to the lake house, the familiar scenery invoking an odd mix of nostalgia and betrayal. It had been a decade since he last laid eyes on the dilapidated wooden structure, a mere ghost of summers spent chasing sunbeams and laughter. Now it loomed over him like a mausoleum of his childhood memories. 10 years dedicated to climbing the academic ladder in New York City, yet he felt emptier than ever, like a shadow trapped in a suit of ambition. In the echoing void of his success, he felt the pressure of his family's expectations pulling him back, heavy and unrelenting. As he stepped inside, the air felt thick with the weight of unspoken dreams and buried regrets. Boxes lined the walls, remnants of his past caged in layers of dust. A soft voice broke the silence, pulling him from his reverie. "Are you a painter?" Ben turned to find a small boy with eyes that reflected the lake's shimmering surface, an uncanny replica of his younger self. Ethan's innocent curiosity was jarring, igniting an unsettling flame within Ben's chest. This was no mere coincidence. It felt like fate mocking him. "What's your name?" Ethan asked, tilting his head just so, his expression a mirror image of lost curiosity that once thrived in Ben's own youth. It caught him off guard, the unrelenting urge to protect this child feeling like an intrusion into his carefully constructed life. "Ben," he managed to respond, his mind racing with questions. What would it mean to have a child who looked exactly like him? The first misstep echoed in his thoughts. How could he reconcile this with the ambition that had defined him? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As days slipped by, Ben and Ethan found refuge in each other's creativity. The gentle swish of paint on canvas became their shared language. Yet a disquiet loitered in Ben's heart. Watching Ethan flourish brought an unsettling clarity to everything he had sacrificed for accolades. At every brushstroke, Ben felt guilt wash over him, the knowledge that his own dreams were smothered beneath layers of ambition. Would his relentless pursuit of success cost this boy his innocence? News arrived like a bullet, sharp and invasive. An art institution in town had plans to seize Ethan's talent for profits, twisting it into a soulless commodity. Rage ignited in Ben, an overwhelming fury that sprang from the depths, a drive to protect what he never had. Yet as he plotted against the unseen predator, doubts clawed at him. Was he too driven by personal ambition? Did he want to see Ethan shine for the sake of his own career, or to allow the boy to flourish untainted in the world? Standing at the precipice of this decision, Ben felt the tremors of internal conflict that he had tried to escape for so long. Every choice he faced felt irresistible and impossibly heavy. The legacy of unfulfilled dreams, familial ties, the ghosts of ambition, both empowering and suffocating. Ethan's laughter echoed through the trees as Ben stood frozen, torn between ambition and the newfound loyalty to a brother he never knew existed. The line between nurturing and exploiting blurred. The sunlight dancing on the lake's surface now felt like judgment. As the shadows lengthened, Ben's breath quickened. The raging storm of emotions within him reached a fever pitch, leaving him teetering on the edge of despair. What would he choose for Ethan, and perhaps more crucially, for himself? The answer sat just out of reach, as vibrant and ephemeral as the sunset flickering on the horizon, coaxing him deeper into the storm of uncertainty. Ben stirred in the depths of an internal turmoil as he grappled with the implications of his newfound relationship with Ethan. Their shared moments of creativity drew out not only his artistic instinct, but also a burgeoning sense of responsibility. Each splash of color on the canvas echoed a deeper longing for purpose, a stark contrast to the colorless life he had cultivated in the hustle of corporate New York. Eventually, the days melted into a routine of joyful collaboration, yet the specter of that art institution loomed large, an ominous shadow threatening to strip Ethan of his innocence and Ben of his newfound clarity. He ached with the fear that his ambitions would once again lead him to betray those he cared about. This time he questioned whether he could live with the consequences. The weighty silence of the lake house prompted introspection late into the nights. Ben had spent years building an identity focused on accolades and degrees, but here, surrounded by peeling paint and echoes of laughter, he felt the thin veneer of success begin to crack. Ethan's laughter became a lifeline, tethering him to a world beyond prestige, the world of potentials, raw and unrefined. One afternoon, while painting together, Ethan watched him, his innocent eyes sparkling with admiration that felt disarming. "Will you teach me to paint like you?" he asked, sincerity woven through his words. A question loaded with promise, it reflected the deep desire Ben had once buried beneath ambition. "Of course," Ben replied, surprised by the gentle tug at his heart. He felt a hint of pride, yet it was soon mingled with an acute realization. Teaching Ethan meant confronting the very demons he had avoided.
Without knowing it, Ethan was drawing out truths that Ben had long suppressed. Creating a schedule, he dedicated time to sharing techniques, emphasizing the joy of painting rather than the need for approval. As the boy painted, his strokes bold and unafraid, Ben marveled at the unfiltered expression of creativity, void of fear and expectation. The simplicity was intoxicating, shifting the axis of Ben's focus. But how could he protect that light? As dusk approached one evening, a storm cloud of thoughts brewed within him. A conversation with Ethan had revealed the school's need for a chosen one, someone to market not just a talent, but a story. He almost sighed at the irony, the haunting echo of his own childhood ambition against the backdrop of a child's budding passion. Decisively, Ben took action. He would not allow Ethan to be swept away into a world of exploitation and commercialism that churned out templates and profits rather than artists and innovators. The bubbling determination propelled him forward, pushing through the pervasive doubt. He needed to expose the institution's agenda, confront the board, defend Ethan's right to create freely. Days turned to nights as Ben brewed a plan. The shifting shadows cast by the lake reminded him that fears often masquerade as protective instincts. He may not have had the tools to combat the pressures of ambition before, but now he had clarity, purpose, a fire to foster in the boy who carried his soul's reflection. As Ben gathered his materials for a meeting that might forever change the course of their fates, Ethan's image filled his mind. The idea spiraled inward. What would their future hold if he succeeded? The thought of losing the boy, the bond they forged, paralyzed him. The very gears of fate churned ominously in the background, a tension building before inevitable confrontation. The time had come to face not only the institution, but the parts of himself he had long buried. Uncertainty loomed as he stepped out of the sanctuary of the lake house, determination etched deep within. How much was he willing to sacrifice to shield Ethan from the same fate he endured? Would he too fall prey to the suffocating ambition that clouded his judgment? Ben clenched his fists as he headed toward the car. A reckoning awaited him, and the mirror of his past would soon force him to decide how far he would go to protect his brother. The drive to the institution felt heavier than usual. A sense of purpose mixed uneasily with trepidation churned in Ben's gut. Memories of his own artistic journey flooded his mind, a relentless pursuit for recognition that had often left him hollow. If success had come at the price of integrity, he was determined to prevent Ethan from experiencing the same hollow victory. Arriving at the austere brick building, Ben hesitated outside the entrance, the cold wind carrying whispers of doubt. What if they dismissed his concerns? What if confronting the board only turned Ethan's world darker? Each possible outcome spiraled before him, a cacophony of what-ifs that could derail his intentions. He steadied his breath, grounding himself in the conviction that this was not just for Ethan. It was for himself, a course correction he desperately needed. Inside, the polished floors mirrored the sterile ambition of those who walked them. The gallery walls depicting past artworks seemed like trophies housed in a mausoleum, triumph celebrated while resonance faded. As Ben ascended to the meeting room, doubt cut through him again. Did he truly have a chance against an institution built on the ideals he once revered? Villains, he recalled, often wore polished facades. The board members, stoic and seemingly untouchable, awaited him, a council of artists who had traded passion for prestige. Ben felt the heat of their scrutiny as he entered, the air thick with expectation, but he pushed forward, determination igniting his voice. "I'm here to discuss Ethan Caldwell's future," he began, locking eyes with the chairperson.
The pressure to mold him into your ideal of art is dangerous. Art shouldn't be manufactured. It should be raw. It should be honest. Mr. Acker, the chairperson interjected, a hint of disdain underscoring their authoritative tone. The market values stories as much as art. The chosen one will need a narrative to succeed in this industry. Then promote the truth. Ben's voice strengthened, fueled by the image of Ethan's bold strokes. Teach him to embrace his authenticity. Don't fashion him into a marketable product. You're not just shaping an artist, you're cultivating an entire spirit. The silence hung heavy in the room, punctuated only by the ticking clock, a reminder of time slipping through his fingers like the very paint Ethan wielded. Across the table, Ben's thesis echoed louder than any gallery accolades ever could. The moment he buried his ambition in favor of nurturing a bright star was his own ascension. Sheer talent alone won't suffice, a board member responded, their tone blend of caution and skepticism. Your emotional investment is precisely what should guide us, Ben shot back, surprised by his own fervor. If Ethan's talent is blended with integrity, he may just reshape the future of art. Isn't that worth more than fleeting fame? Yet, as he fought to gain their support, a slithering fear crept into his mind. What if they labeled him a mere idealist, someone unable to challenge the status quo? Their skepticism was a sharp reminder that ambition bred pressure, and pressure birthed conformity. Ben's heart raced with the gravity of his own ambitions and fears intertwining, leaving him vulnerable to their judgment. Passion flickered like a candle, and he willed it to burn brighter, forged from the warmth of Ethan's creativity. But what if that same fire burned him instead?
The meeting began to unfold with counter-arguments, veiled threats, and disconcerting deadlines. Equally daunting was the growing sense that he was pitted against the very ambition he once chased. Would he emerge victorious for Ethan, or would he succumb to the shivering reality of his own haunted past? Even as the walls of confrontation grew more solid, Ben found himself drawing strength from Ethan's laughter, imagining how disheartened the boy would be if he lost this fight. The stakes had never felt higher. Outside, the world continued blissfully unaware, but he understood the weight of what was unfolding within these walls. Suddenly, something shifted in the air. An unexpected ally, someone with the power to sway the board, stepped into view. But just as quickly as hope surged, shadows loomed larger than ever. What would happen next, and could Ben truly change the trajectory of Ethan's path? Ben felt the light shift in the room, his senses sharpened, and the heart of the confrontation pulsed more fiercely as the unexpected ally entered. Dee Hastings, a prominent artist, known for her unconventional methods and fierce advocacy for integrity in art, strolled in with an energy that shifted the atmosphere. Her reputation preceded her like a herald, and suddenly the board members' expressions danced between intrigue and wariness. "Is there a problem here?" Dee's voice cut through the tension like a chisel against stone, her eyes scanning the room before landing on Ben. "I hope you haven't forgotten the power of passionate creation over commercial gain." Ben felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He pondered if she had come to support his plea for Ethan, yet skepticism crept into his thoughts. Did her presence stem from genuine solidarity, or was it merely for show? He glanced toward the board, their stoic faces betraying a mix of annoyance and grudging respect. "I believe Ben has raised a crucial point," Dee continued, moving with the grace of someone who knew precisely how to navigate institutions. "Ethan's work is a reflection of his soul. If you stifle that, you risk losing not just an artist, but a vital voice." Ben's heart raced as he let Dee's words resonate within him. He had spent years hiding behind ideals, allowing his own voice to dim amid the chorus of industry demands and conventional success. Watching her assert her beliefs ignited something within him, a reckless desire to reclaim the tenacity he had buried long ago. "Thank you, Dee," he found the strength to interject, his voice steady, despite the weight of vulnerability. "What we must confront is not just the industry's thoughts about art, but our own, especially when it concerns nurturing the authenticity of a rising talent like Ethan." The board members leaned in, curiosity piqued by both Ben and Dee's passionate declaration. Here was a chance, revitalized by newly aligned forces, to draw down the walls that had stifled creativity.
But as Ben's courage swelled, so did his fears. He realized he was no longer just fighting for Ethan. He was battling his old self, the complacency that allowed him to sideline his own artistry. "Ben, can you really embody what you're asking others to support?" a board member challenged, the skepticism returning. "You have your own past of compromise." The words struck like a dagger.
Ben paused, the past unraveled in his mind. Each choice that had led him to cast away his integrity in the name of ambition, replaying painfully. Yet amidst that agony, a new determination took root. He could no longer hide behind nostalgic illusions. He had to confront the ugly truths of his artistry. "Yes, I have faltered," he admitted, voice resolute, "but I refuse to do so again. Art is not merely a product to be sold. It's a dialogue, a shared journey. It's time we redefine success." In that moment, a shift occurred within Ben. The clarity of his own resolve fortified him. A determination to no longer be merely a bystander to fate overwhelmed him. He could guide Ethan away from the pitfalls he himself had stumbled over. It was possible, necessary even, to forge a new path. Dee's supportive nod rekindled the spark of hope within Ben. If they could break through the barriers of the institution, he could not only protect Ethan's vision, but reclaim his own lost resolve. His heart surged as a metaphorical fire ignited. The board's silence was charged with uncertainty. Yet when they spoke again, their tone suggested that change might be possible. "We've entertained these notions, Mr. Acker, but we must know, what exactly do you propose?" The weight of expectations now bore down on Ben. He paused to collect thoughts swirling in his mind, weighing the responsibility he felt toward Ethan against the momentum of his own transformation. He needed to gather his vision, to articulate a plan that could genuinely intertwine artistry with integrity, a way for both him and Ethan to thrive without compromise. The challenge ahead called for clarity. He had to transcend his own past mistakes, not just for himself, but for the voice of the next generation. What would it take to reshape their futures? The gravity of his next words loomed heavy on his tongue, and Ben could almost hear the echoes of a new narrative forming. He sensed the world standing on the precipice of transformation, ready to take the plunge. Yet as he prepared to answer, a familiar figure from his past lurked outside the door, someone who would once again challenge everything he had fought for. Would the echoes of history aid in his endeavor, or derail his new resolute? Ben took a deep breath, grounding himself in the weight of expectation. The board's curiosity hung in the air, coupled with skepticism. It was a precarious moment. The stakes felt unnervingly personal.
Despite the fear clawing at him, he recognized this as an opportunity to articulate a vision that transcended mere profit, one that could integrate his past missteps with a hopeful future. He leaned forward, gathering the fragmented pieces of his confidence. "I propose we create an initiative that not only showcases Ethan's work, but also serves as a platform for emerging artists, an incubator for authenticity. We could offer mentorship and resources, encouraging genuine expression rather than commercial viability." A flicker of intrigue sparked among the board members, their rigid facades beginning to crack. Yet a knot tightened in Ben's stomach as he sensed underlying resistance. Instituting such a shift would invariably confront long-standing traditions, especially since he himself had compromised those ideals before. Was he truly capable of leading this change? "Are you suggesting we invest in artists who may not yield immediate returns?" another board member queried, eyes glinting with skepticism. "That's a risky move." "Maybe it is," Ben countered, finding a burgeoning resolve within. "But isn't it risk that rejuvenates creativity? Isn't it the very heartbeat of art? We should fear stagnation more than we fear failure." Dee stepped up beside him, echoing, "Art is a living conversation. If we choose the safe path, we stifle discourse. It's time we took a calculated chance on the unpredictable pulse of real talent." As the murmurs of the board swirled around him, Ben's mind raced. Here was an arena, a stage that could redefine not just Ethan's future, but his own. It would require him to clarify his own artistic principles, to embrace vulnerability. He took a daring leap into the unknown. "I'll take ownership of this project, fully committed to nurturing the rawest forms of creativity. I refuse to allow the fear of failure to dictate our choices." Each word landed with a weight that sent ripples through the room. Suddenly, he was not just advocating for Ethan, but advocating for the artist within himself, the one who had been silenced for far too long. Yet just as he felt buoyed by a rising tide of shared enthusiasm, his past lurked dangerously close, ready to pounce. The distant figure he had spotted earlier appeared at the door again, this time resolutely stepping inside. A ghost from his history, David, a former mentor whose opinions had shaped Ben's career and contributed to his compromises. How had he ended up here, now,
standing in the very crossroads Ben now dared to navigate. "Ben," David's voice sliced through the optimism like a chill wind, drawing immediate attention. "I thought you understood the importance of financial viability. This is not the time to indulge in whimsy." The board took a collective breath, eyes darting between the two men. Ben felt a tightening of resolve turning into a fist, something raw igniting within.
David represented everything Ben had fought against, each word a reminder of the bitter compromises he had once embraced. "Indulgence is not my interest, David. What you call whimsy, I call authenticity," Ben shot back, rage surging through him. "This isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving with integrity." With each heartbeat, Ben felt the tide rising. A chance to firmly plant his feet in the ground of his own values ignited a fire within, a deep-seated need to stand firm against old paradigms. He could feel Dee's presence beside him, an ally in this confrontation, and he seized upon the energy growing in the room. "What do you really want, Ben?" David pressed, his voice oily with disdain. "A legacy or a paycheck?" Ben refused to cower. "I want a legacy that reflects truth, a truth we can build together. But I won't sacrifice integrity to conform to your definition of success. Not anymore." In that moment, the tension reached a boiling point, a point of no return ignited in both him and the assembly. Ben's heart raced, the air electric with repercussions looming ahead. David's response could thrust him back into the shadows or propel him into the light. Standing there, Ben felt the gravity of the moment, to either cower or break through. Yet within that turmoil lay a singular burning question. Could he truly remain steadfast against the noise of his past? With eyes fixed firmly on David, the foundations of his new resolve shifted beneath him. Would courage prevail in this confrontation, or would the shadows of his past once again claim dominion over his life? The atmosphere crackled with tension as David's silence lingered, punctuating the weight of Ben's challenge. For a fleeting moment, Ben dared to hope that David would yield, that the vestiges of their old relationship might bend and reshape. But the look in David's eyes told him otherwise. There was no retreat in his demeanor, only the sharp edge of dismissal. "Legacy built on delusion is nothing more than a mirage," David replied, his voice cold and pointed. The room held its breath, the board's eyes darting back to Ben, waiting for a flinch, a moment of weakness, anything that might signal he intended to revert to the safe, compromised path he had walked so many times before. Yet Ben felt a strange clarity in his resolve. "Success is not defined by market trends or immediate returns, David. It's about cultivating a space where true talent can flourish, where artists connect with their audience and their own voice without fear." He took a step forward, channeling the energy surging through him. "You can either help build that space or stand back and watch it be formed without you. I choose to guide this project into a future ripe with possibility." David's expression darkened, a shadow crossing his features, but it only fueled Ben's determination. He understood now that his past mistakes did not condemn him.
They were a part of his journey, but they did not define his present or dictate his future. The confrontation was not merely with David, it was a confrontation with his own insecurities. Slowly, as though granting permission, he shifted his gaze to the board members. "We are at a crossroads, and I know we can choose the profitable path, but I urge you to consider the value of authenticity. The world has changed. Audiences are craving something genuine. They want art that speaks to them, not just to trends. If we can foster real talent, it will resonate. That's how we ensure long-term success." The board's response was a mix of skeptical glances and murmurs of contemplation. In that moment, Ben could see the flickering recognition of possibility in some of their eyes. He pressed forward, sensing the opportunity to convert doubt into commitment. "Let's redefine our narrative. Let's be the champions of creativity that this industry desperately needs." He paused, grounding himself in his own words before delivering his final message. "I won't just fight for Ethan. I'll fight for every artist who has the courage to share their truth. Join me, or risk losing the very essence of what drives our industry." A flicker of something changed in the room, a crack in the collective hesitance. He had laid himself bare, vulnerable yet unyielding, and that courage called to some of them. It was as if the air shifted, infusing the space with a new kind of hope. David, however, remained unmoved. And if this endeavor fails, if these artists produce nothing but financial losses, his tone now laced with a hint of begrudging respect, but still steeped in skepticism. Ben did not flinch.
The risk was real, and it was exhilarating. Then I will take full responsibility, but I believe they will succeed, and in doing so, we will too. Our legacy will not be measured by the numbers on a spreadsheet, but by the genuine impact we have. As the board pondered his words, Ben's heart raced, not from fear, but from a realization of his own potential to influence not just the present, but the future as well. He could feel his confidence growing, feeding off the shared energy around him, powerful enough to challenge both David and the old models they had been shackled to. It was time to embrace who he truly was and what he truly stood for. In declaring his ownership of this new direction, he could finally step out of the shadow of compromise and into something authentic. But David wasn't finished yet. And if I choose to oppose this, if I rally those who believe in the old ways— A wave of uncertainty crashed over Ben. The implications hung in the air, a chilling reminder that his old mentor still wielded influence. Would he have to face an even larger fight than he anticipated? The tension between past and future loomed ominously, threatening to engulf him as the board continued to deliberate. Ben clenched his fist, preparing to confront not just David, but the entire establishment.
This wasn't merely about one project. It was about a fundamental shift in how he saw himself and the industry he had once felt forced to navigate without conviction. Could he truly rally both his colleagues and the artists around a new vision? Or would the ghosts of his past and the voices of opposition overwhelm him once more? The boardroom buzzed with hushed debates and shifting alliances, the air palpable with possibility and doubt. Ben stood at the center of it all, like a man stepping into the ring, heart racing, not from fear, but from the intoxicating thrill of purpose. Each board member shifted uneasily in their seats, as if trying to navigate the storm brewing in the room. Suddenly, David's dismissive remarks struck again. "Your idealism doesn't pay the bills, Ben. You're fighting a ghost, one that doesn't exist in the real world. Those dreams you have, they'll lead you nowhere." Each syllable felt charged, but instead of retreating into his old familiar patterns, Ben paused to reflect on his path. He had always been told to play it safe, to prioritize financial security over creative freedom. Yet here he stood, realizing the strength of his voice. "David, it was that fear of failure that kept us stagnant," he asserted, leaning into his newfound self-awareness. "We've allowed complacency to dictate our decisions for too long." In that moment, he felt an awakening of sorts, a recognition of the creative force he had so often stifled. He recalled the countless nights spent dreaming about artistry, about gathering uniquely authentic talents into one space and letting them inspire one another. "This isn't just a project," he continued, his tone firm yet passionate. "It's a movement towards transparency, towards revitalizing what drew us to this industry in the first place. People are hungry for authenticity. They want to believe in something real." As his boldness grew, he caught sight of Karen, one of the board members whose opinion had always carried weight. She looked conflicted, her brows slightly knitted, clearly wrestling with her allegiance to both the old guard and this emerging vision. "What if we truly invest in the artists, Ben? What if we give them what they need to develop their craft?" she unexpectedly asked, her earlier skepticism softening. "That's precisely my point," Ben replied eagerly, sensing a crack in the facade of opposition. "By investing in genuine artistic talents, instead of playing it safe through mere trends, we can change the narrative that defines success. We have the power to influence both the industry and our legacy." The room was still, save for the ticking clock and the soft shuffle of papers. The weight of his words hung in the balance. How could he capture this moment? How could he seize the momentum he suddenly felt? He realized with clarity that he needed to operate from a place of both conviction and strategy. He had galvanized their interest, but now it was time to formulate an actionable plan that acknowledged their fears while inspiring hope. Suddenly, David's quiet voice broke into his thoughts. "Assuming you galvanize any supporters behind your argument, how will you deal with the inevitable backlash?" The challenge was poised and unyielding, but Ben could see it brought a spark of curiosity in David's eyes, as if he too was intrigued by the prospect of something new yet again. Ben took a breath, ready to embrace the challenge ahead. "We'll approach it transparently. We'll hold forums and workshops where artists can voice their concerns. We'll allow them to lead the discussions." His words flowed with eloquence, but internal panic swirled beneath the surface. Had he thought deep enough? Would they trust him to facilitate that kind of dialogue? Still,
The confidence he had tapped into bolstered his resolve, and he decided then that he would not question his capabilities. As the board began to engage, it became evident that the early doubts were giving way to cautious curiosity. Murmurs passed amongst them as Ben stood tall, fully aware that this was the crucible moment he had long awaited. It was then that a thought struck him, unshakable and chilling. He had cultivated belief, but what would happen when the dust settled? Could he truly implement this vision without enough support, or worse, without knowing the depth of David's resolve? The looming uncertainty cast a shadow over his burgeoning optimism. The challenges he faced were only beginning, and as he scanned the faces around him, waiting for their responses to solidify his vision, he suddenly sensed that perhaps a deeper threat might be ahead, one not just from David, but from within the very fabric of the industry's expectations. The stakes had never felt higher. Would he be able to transform his ideals into reality, or would he find himself ensnared in a struggle against old ways that threatened to drown his passion? He tightened his grip on the tabletop, resolution coiling within him. What he needed now was to prepare for more than just a battle of ideas. He was up against an evolving legacy that would test him in ways he hadn't yet conceived. Could he rise to meet it? A question hung in the air, shifting the momentum again. Who would walk away from this meeting transformed? The boardroom doors slid shut, the noise of external chatter muted, leaving Ben in a vacuum of anticipation. His heart thudded louder in the silence. The eyes of the board members burned into him, a mixture of intrigue and skepticism. He felt the weight of his proposal pressing heavily on his shoulders, a mix of responsibility and an unmistakable yearning for change. He had stirred something in the room, but now the challenge shifted from inspiration to execution. How would he turn belief into action?
He remembered the incendiary passion that had driven him to this very point, the countless conversations with friends about creativity and freedom, the arguments rationalizing why the status quo was no longer tenable. Cutting through the fog of doubt was a clear vision. He now had to transform it into a structured plan. Ben's mind whirred with ideas, but self-doubt clawed at the edges. Could he harness his past experiences and newly discovered confidence to navigate the challenges? How could he marry artistry with the practicalities of financial realities that loomed dangerously close? Suddenly, the specter of failure danced in front of him, whispering that he might be overstepping his bounds. "What's your first step, Ben?" Karen's voice sliced through the silence. It wasn't just a question, it was a challenge. Her eyes, once softened with curiosity, now held a steely focus. He had to think on his feet. "First, I'll organize a series of brainstorming sessions. I want everyone from artists to producers to share their ideas and concerns. It's essential that we create a culture of open dialogue. We need their commitment. That raw energy might just fuel our movement forward." His own words echoed back to him with an unexpected clarity, lifting the fog of uncertainty. With that, the agenda blossomed. He began to calculate how much ground they could cover. Would they engage potential supporters outside the boardroom, leveraging social media, bringing in influencers? Would industry veterans see an opportunity for renewal instead of a threat? Drawing on the quiet moments during his years away from the hustle and bustle of the industry, Ben understood the critical need for diversification and inclusivity. We can invite guest speakers, independent artists who've navigated this terrain successfully. Their stories can inspire not just our own teams, but the entire community. Yet doubts crept back in. Would those very artists feel marginalized in a system designed to prop up mediocrity? As he assessed the sea of doubtful faces around him, he fought the urge to recoil. He reminded himself of the fear that held sway over others. It was this paralyzing sense of what if that had kept them from pursuing genuine paths. Transparency will be our cornerstone. We'll document every meeting, every decision, ensuring everyone has a stake in this evolution. As he spoke, he felt the passion welling up again. Ideas began to flow, untethered and unabashed, mingling with emotion. The prospect of igniting true change was intoxicating. In that moment, Ben saw a sliver of understanding in Karen's expression, and alignment with his vision that offered a brief moment of solace amidst the storm. But David's voice suddenly echoed in his thoughts. Backlash was inevitable. The boardroom dynamics began to shift once again, whispers growing louder. He could sense David's strategic mind calculating their next steps, a formidable opponent cloaked in grim reassurance. Could he trust that he was forging a path others would follow, or was he walking into a web of old loyalties that would ensnare him? The tension increased palpably, and Ben needed a counter-strategy, something to rally those willing to tread a new and uncertain path. As if on cue, Karen posed a new question. And if they resist, what will you do when the old ways fight back? That stark reminder revived Ben's resolve. The confrontation would come sooner than he anticipated. He had to prepare for the looming struggle, and if he wanted to stay true to his purpose, he must fortify not just himself, but also those who believed in change. The exhilaration mingling with fear set his heart racing. The path before him was fraught with potential hazards, but within those lines he glimpsed opportunity. Could he be the catalyst that drove the necessary transformation? The boardroom fell into contemplative silence again, leaving Ben to grapple with the daunting question: how far would he go to protect the vision he had crafted? And perhaps more critically, was he ready to confront those forces that would seek to stifle it? He took a deep breath, prepared to either ignite the revolution or face the disillusionment, a duality that weighed heavily upon him. In a world increasingly resistant to change, would he ultimately find solidarity with those who accepted his vision, or would he stand alone against a tide too powerful to navigate? The tension thickened, and Ben knew he was standing at the precipice of transformation, both for the industry and himself. Who, he wondered, would be ready to embrace the change alongside him? Ben stepped out of the boardroom, the cacophony of competing ideas and mixed emotions swirling behind him like a tempest. His initial adrenaline rush had ebbed, leaving behind raw uncertainty. As he moved through the corridor, the fluorescent lights above flickered dramatically, almost echoing the internal conflict thrumming within him. It was a remnant of the tension he'd faced, and he couldn't shake the sensation that he was straddling two worlds, one steeped in caution and comfort, the other pulsing with potential and danger. He leaned against a cold metal railing, taking a moment to breathe. He reflected on Karen's question: what if they resisted? The thought twisted uncomfortably in his gut. Resistance would breed backlash, and with it he could lose the very vision he was trying to birth. Yet this wasn't the time to dwell on fear. It was time to embrace the challenge head-on. Ben began pacing, his mind racing. Each step echoed a different facet of his objective: inspiration, outreach, collaboration. The concrete corridors of corporate safety and the vibrant chaos of artistic expression collided violently within him. He recalled a moment in a bustling cafe just before he left the industry, where a mentor had told him, "Art thrives on tension, Ben. It's where the spark ignites."
With every step, he felt that spark flicker to life in his chest. Why not lead with that? He mumbled to himself, a dynamic idea crystallizing as he walked. Moments of struggle often birthed the most profound forms of creativity. It dawned on him that in this transition, he needed to openly acknowledge the dissension rather than approach it as a threat. It could be an opportunity. He would hold an open forum, a space where fears and concerns could be aired freely. Instead of suppressing dissent, he could harness it, allow it to transform into constructive dialogue. Ben stopped abruptly, a rush of exhilaration filling him. This was not just about pushing his agenda, it was about truly listening and pivoting their trajectory based on feedback. He hurried back to his desk, his fingers tapping furiously on his laptop, drafting a compelling invitation to the board for an all-hands meeting. He envisioned vibrant visuals decorating the room, each representing different perspectives within the industry. Guest speakers whose experiences mirrored that uncertainty could echo through the room, narrating paths navigated through challenges, fueling a shared sense of resilience. The draft flowed from his fingertips, a carefully constructed narrative inviting every voice to share, to push back, to confront the transformation he envisioned. It was time for the boardroom to become a breeding ground for new ideas, a sanctuary for struggling creatives, and a venue for debate. But what would that look like in practice? How would he manage difficult personalities like David, or those who simply didn't understand? The thought gnawed at him. He decided to call in trusted colleagues for a brainstorming session immediately. He needed a think tank, individuals who aligned with the vision yet could satiate his fears by voicing the counterarguments. Their insights could fortify his plans and allow him to anticipate roadblocks before they blossomed into full-scale resistance. After sending out his emails, Ben felt an electric rush of purpose. He had moved through a fog of uncertainty to a clearer, more determined self. Excitement mingled with anxiety as he glanced at the calendar. He had set a timeline, no turning back now. But just as confidence surged within him, the specter of doubt intertwined with his resolve. What if people rejected this approach? What if he wasn't equipped to handle the harsh realities of dissent? What if failure led to more than professional disappointment, but shattered his aspirations forever? As these thoughts circled like vultures, he pushed them aside, a mantra forming in his mind: embrace the tension, embrace the fear. He had been away from this path for too long. It was time to stand firm amidst the storm. His phone buzzed with a new message, a reminder of the gathering he planned to organize.
The brief excitement was short-lived, however, as he remembered the thin line he had to navigate.
Would his attempts at engagement restore passion, or would they merely inflame divisions? Ben's chest tightened as he contemplated the chasm between his aspirations and potential fallout. He was racing toward a pivotal moment, a collision between his vision and the existing reality. And if he miscalculated, the stakes were staggeringly high. Determined not to falter, he steeled himself. It was time to push boundaries, test his limits, and confront those who would stand in his way. The next chapter in his journey was about to unfold, and the tension of anticipation danced in the air around him. Would he rise to meet the challenge, or would he crumble under the immense weight of his ambitions? The answers lay ahead, shrouded in uncertainty, ready to be uncovered. Ben stood amid the easterly light filtering through the window of the lake house, feeling a profound shift within himself. Weeks of intense confrontation, self-reflection, and emotional investment had culminated here, far from the stifling corporate world that had once defined him. He had taken the leap, shunning complacency to step firmly into the embrace of authenticity. Ethan's laughter danced in the backdrop as Ben coaxed color onto the canvas, each stroke carrying echoes of the battles fought both outside and within. No longer was he merely a curator of ambition. He was an active participant defining what success meant, not just for himself, but for the boy he had come to cherish. The confrontation at the board had ignited within him a fire that would not be silenced. He had stood before that round table of skeptics, David included, and allowed his passion for art to uncoil as he'd summoned every ounce of determination. Art is more than just a product for sale. It is a truth we must protect. Those words had cut through the substance of their critiques like a knife, and they reverberated still within his spirit. The days that followed his bold proclamation transformed the landscape of his life. Striding into the meetings that ensued, he felt a newfound power coursing through him, a solid confidence arising from the knowledge that integrity, once buried under ambition, had indeed risen to the surface. He garnered support from choice allies within the board, those who were ready to champion his vision of fostering raw creativity instead of catering to commercialism. Recognition from established artists trickled into his network, validation of his resolve now evident in the dialogue they created together. Workshops began to flourish, echoing the sentiments he had shared. Creativity emerged not from a space of fear, but from shared collaboration. There was a growing sense of community among artists who had long been relegated to the fringes, their authentic voices now celebrated. Meanwhile, Ethan's talent blossomed, nurtured by freedom instead of commodification. The boy would no longer be molded into a chosen one, but he would walk his own path, guided by lessons learned from a brother he had never previously known. This new approach didn't just advance Ethan's future, it united a community of creatives hungry for autonomy. It all came to a head when the institution hosted a festival, not to celebrate monetary success, but to amplify the artists' voices, the genuine narratives they embodied. Each exhibit told a story of struggle, resilience, and ultimately triumph over the heavy hand of conformity. Ben stood proudly by Ethan's side as his little brother's work captured the audience's hearts, commentaries filled with awe for his raw expression. In that moment, Ben felt a deep satisfaction cascade over him. He marveled at what had been accomplished, not solely for the glory of a single artist, but for a collective ethos that celebrated true artistry in its purest form. No longer fearing judgment, he had traded the burden of expectations for the delight of shared creation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the lake in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Ben felt whole. He had achieved not just a dream, but had conquered a fear deeply rooted in his identity. The emptiness he once harbored had been filled with purpose, solidified by recognition, not just from others, but within himself. He turned to Ethan, eyes sparkling with anticipation of all the adventures yet to come. Ben understood his journey was no longer tangled in securing professional accolades, but was now about uplifting others. This was the moment he had both awaited and fought for, a culmination of transformation. He was no longer just Ben, a shadow of ambition. He was Ben, able to inspire, nurture, and create with integrity. The winds of change had truly swept him into a new chapter. Now the time has come for you to show your support for this transformative journey. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next emotional stories of personal victory.
Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let the world see the power of these narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Your voice matters. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this extraordinary conclusion. Your action can inspire the spark in someone else.